Okay. We'll start the hearing at 7:01. Introductions. I'm Tom White, First Selectman, Town of Morris. Jim Simoncelli, the Executive Director of the Morris Housing Authority, could not be here tonight. I think something came up at the last minute for him, so he cannot make it. But online we have David Berto. He's the CDBG grant consultant, and he'll be basically running us through the meeting here. I'm not sure if you have the information that Jim was supposed to have for the meeting or not, David?
Yes, I can cover that part, yes.
I get some more people coming in online. So David, if you'd like to start, well, actually, I guess you want me to read the notice of public hearing?
Yes, please.
Or without objection, can we waive that?
You should not.
Okay, you ready for this?
Ready.
It'd be half the meeting. Notice of public hearing. Notice is hereby given that the town of Morris will conduct a public hearing by the Board of Selectmen at the Morris Community Hall, 3 East Street, Connecticut, 06763 on Monday, May 22nd, 2023 at 7 p.m. in person via Zoom and it gives the Zoom address, which I will not read. Meeting ID and passcode to discuss the fiscal year 2023 Community Development Block Grant Program to solicit citizen input. Maximum award limits are 1.5 million for public housing modernization and 1 million for infrastructure associated with the development of affordable housing. Major activity categories are acquisition, housing rehabilitation, public housing modernization, community facilities, public services, and economic development. Projects funded with CDBG allocations must carry out at least one of 3 national objectives: benefit to low and moderate income persons, elimination of slums and blight, or meeting urgent community development needs. The purpose of the public hearing is to obtain citizens' views on the town's community development and housing needs, and review and discuss specific project activities in the areas of housing, economic development, or community facilities, which could be part of the town's new application for funding for the fiscal year 2023. The First Selectman on behalf of the town of Morris anticipates applying for a grant amount of not to exceed $800,000 under the Affordable Housing Infrastructure Planning, Engineering, and Construction eligible activity. The town of Morris promotes fair housing and makes all programs available to low and moderate income households regardless of race, creed, color, national origin, ancestry, sex, gender identity, or expression, marital status, age, lawful source of income, familiar status, learning disability, or physical and mental disability, or sexual orientation. Let me just admit somebody. If you're unable to attend the public hearing, you may direct written comments to the town of Morris First Selectman's Office, 3 East Street, P.O. Box 66, Morris, Connecticut, 06763, or you may telephone the First Selectman's Office at 860-567-7431. In addition, information may be obtained by appointment at the above address Monday through Thursday between the hours of 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and Fridays from 8:30 a.m. to noon. All are encouraged to attend. The hearing is accessible to the handicapped. Any disabled persons requiring special assistance or non-English speaking persons should contact the First Selectman's Office ADA coordinator at 860-567-7431 at least 5 days prior to the hearing. Equal opportunity, affirmative action. There we are.
Okay,
Excuse me, Tom, are you recording the meeting?
Yes.
Oh, good, thank you.
Okay, David.
okay, thank you. It was important that that be read because it provides a fair amount of information right in it. And also because this is an application that's being prepared for federal funding, the federal funding requirements need to be met as far as providing the appropriate amount of information at a meeting like this. So the subject of the project that's being talked about here is affordable housing adjacent to the Eldridge senior housing on East Street. The Housing Authority has recently purchased the lot just south of the housing, between the housing and the main road, and there's a house in between there too. They've purchased a lot there, and the purpose of that is to create some affordable housing, some additional affordable housing in town in a series of steps. The housing that's planned, unlike Eldridge, which is limited to elderly, the housing that's planned on this small lot is planned to be open to all ages for families. Right now, there's a preliminary plan. It's a relatively small parcel. There's a preliminary plan to build 2 buildings, 1-story buildings, up on the hill toward the back with parking up there. And each building will have 4 apartments in it. So the plan is to have 8 apartments together up there in those 2 buildings, with a combination of 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom units to provide ability for different types of affordable housing for different family sizes and age groups and incomes. The purpose of the application is, as was read, is to apply for infrastructure and planning funding to prepare the site for the construction of the housing. The reason for that is this federal funding allows the funds to be used for those purposes, but it excludes the actual building of the housing, and that would be from a different funding source after we get this approved and implemented. The work and the planning will be done by the Morris Housing Authority that owns and operates Eldridge Senior Housing and that purchased the land. The thing about community development block grant funding is it must be applied for by the town. That's why this is a town meeting. And when it receives the funding, it will enter into a contract with the Housing Authority as a subrecipient to administer the funding and provide that the work is done properly and that proper reports are done. So that's the relationship in this project between the town and the Housing Authority. And a short description of the project. We're at the very early stages of project design right now. The site design has been drafted up with the layout for the buildings and the roadway and the parking. The soils have been tested and they are adequate for septic systems as you need there. We will be having a well driller come out in the next couple of weeks to make sure that we can get a well in for proper amount of water. It's not a large amount with 8 apartments. So all of that is underway with a plan toward getting to a site plan application to planning and zoning when we can get all that work done and it's ready for presentation to planning and zoning. Because just like everything else, this needs to go through the normal approval process through the town but we don't need that for the application. The application is due next week, and we're having this information session as part of the requirements to get to that, putting everything together for the application. I say it's due next week, but one workday ago, they then pushed it off to June 23rd, so it's not due next week anymore, which is good because it gives us all more time to do the very many things that are necessary to put the application together. That's the overview of the project that Jim was going to talk about. There's a couple other things now that I need to talk about from just the administration requirements for the CDBG funding. The goals and the objectives of the CDBG program, they're relatively simple. There are 3 goals for this federal funding. One is to promote and enhance fair housing and fair housing choice. This will do that with providing equal opportunity for the housing when it's ready. The second goal is to expand and preserve decent, affordable housing. This will do that because it's working toward expanding affordable housing. And the third goal is to promote and enhance suitable living environments. And this new housing will do that. So this project aligns with the goals of the federal CDBG funding quite well. There are 3 national objectives, and you only have to meet one of those because they're somewhat different. But in order to apply, you have to meet one of the objectives. We meet the first objective, which is benefit to low and moderate income persons, because that will be the subset of people that will qualify and will live in the apartments. The other 2 objectives for other uses of federal funding are to aid in prevention or elimination of slums or blight. That doesn't apply here. That could apply in some other applications. And to meet community development needs, having a particular urgency that tends to be for disaster recovery, and that doesn't apply here either, but the first one does. Every year, the state gets a certain amount of CDBG funding that's available for these applications. This year, they have the normal amount they've been getting, which is around $12 million. So that's the total pool of money that's available. The community development and housing needs of the applicant have been described with the project we've talked about. The proposed activities for the project are to design and construct the infrastructure, the water, the septic, the drainage, the roadways and parking, to provide the base for the housing that will come later, and to do the continuing planning for the project. The role of the grantee is the town, so we described that. And the consultant, I'm the consultant, so I'll be coordinating all of this for the town and also working with the housing authority. The proposed amount of funds to be used to benefit low and moderate income people, as you heard, up to $800,000. That's still being worked on as we get our costing together. The amount and source of local funds to expend on the project. The town has provided some funds already to get to this point with purchasing the property, but this project is not requesting any further funding. When we get to this point, we will be showing that this project, as described, will be done with the federal funding. notice of any displacement resulting from the proposed activities or notification of no displacement. That doesn't apply because the property is vacant, so there will not be any displacement. So from the standpoint of covering everything to present it to the group, that's been completed. And now we're available for any discussions, inputs, recommendations, suggestions, and we can answer any further questions.
Yes.
I have a question. Is the grant prohibited in terms of seniors?
Yes, it is prohibited in terms of seniors in that the application will be for non-age restricted funding. And the reason for that is the Department of Housing, who administer and decides who gets funded, has indicated they do not have an interest in funding for just senior housing at this point, even though they did a few years ago. Their focus and their intent of funding is for families. But because it's all on one story and there will be one bedroom handicapped accessible units, people who are elderly can certainly apply and can certainly live there.
Thank you. I just had one other question, but I don't, if anybody don't want to. Would that meet our requirement for the 10% affordable housing? And how much do we need in the town of Morris to fulfill our state mandated 10% obligation?
Well, I don't know if you know, David, but I think we're below 2% right now.
Yes, yes, the amount that your town would need to get to 10% is way larger than these 8 units. These 8 units will all qualify. And your town, like many towns in Litchfield County, are well under the 10%. But your town, like other towns, are doing everything they can to provide the necessary housing. Even if you're not going to get to 10%, these will count toward that.
So if our population, I understand, is like 2,000,
2250.
so
The housing units, I think they count.
it's a number of units. Do we know what
We're
that-
almost all single family housing.
right? Do we know the number that we would need to
To get to that point.
reach?
David, as far as I remember, I thought we were about 800 housing units in the town of Morris in that area. Do you know?
Well, I don't know for sure. It's available on the DOH website, but that seems about right for your population. You know, and so if that's true, you need 80, and if you've got 2%, you know, you're like at 15 or 16. So you can see there's a long ways to go. 10%, as some of you probably know, is if you get to 10%, then you have full control over what gets approved going forward from a planning and zoning standpoint. But if you don't, then developers can come in under certain circumstances and bypass the strict zoning regulations. Small towns in Litchfield County are concerned about that, but there's not a preponderance of developers coming in. So, like I say, I think it's great that your town is doing what you can one step at a time.
John, did you have?
I just was curious, how does the application process work for the 8 apartments? Who has control of that?
That will be handled through a standard fair housing marketing plan that's controlled by the housing authority, who will own and operate it. They very well know how to do fair housing and marketing, but it will have extensive advertising. It will accept applications and process applications. The specific details have not been determined yet, but one might anticipate with only 8 units and 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, even less of each of them, that there could be more applications than there are units. And there may end up being a lottery selection in order to ensure that there's a fair process for selection.
Do the people who live in Morris have priority to that?
That does not align with fair housing in the state or the federal fair housing. What everyone has seen is folks that either live in Morris or have connections in Morris, in other, what I'm talking about Morris now, but in any small town, tend to be the predominant applicants and ultimately tend to be the predominant recipients and occupants. So you cannot provide prioritization, but it tends to work that way anyway.
And the state dictates the rent?
The rents are determined by the affordability criteria. That's correct. The state dictates the income levels for the households in order to qualify as affordable housing at different income levels. And then those income levels determine the maximum rents in a way that your household costs cannot be more than 30% of your household income, which is the standard used in Connecticut and by the federal government.
So the town, sorry if I keep asking questions, so the town collects the rent and who maintains the properties? If I have a broken pipe in the middle of winter, who am I calling?
It will be the same as in Eldridge right now, which is owned and operated by the Morris Housing Authority. They will own and operate this one. So it's really an expansion of the way they're doing their business now.
The affordable housing plan for the town is up on the town website.
Yeah, I attended a bunch of those meetings like we did back whenever we did the Zoom and like the beach and stuff. So yeah, I was at a lot of them.
Yeah, the final thing's up on the website.
I just didn't know who was running it and all that stuff.
It's all through the Morris Housing Authority. Currently, like at Eldridge, town's responsibility really is to maintain the roadway and the water system for the Eldridge housing. And the rest is on the Morris Housing Authority. If there's, like you said, if a water heater goes bad or there's a leak in the roof, it's all on the housing authority, not the town of Morris.
Yeah, I guess as a landlord, I guess the question is that if you're building something and you know what the potential or future expenses could be for maintenance.
Right.
You know, on something like that.
Well, that's true, and that's an important consideration. When we put together the main project budget, working together with Jim Simoncelli, it will have all of the normal expected costs for operations, repairs, maintenance, insurance, staff, things like that. But it will also have a reserve for replacement line item so that every year funds will be allocated from the rental cash flow to be put into a capital reserves account to be available when larger costs are needed in the future.
Anyone else?
Just a statement. I just was hoping that we could have kept that, kind of consistent with the elderly, since we do need additional elderly housing, and maybe a I was hoping for maybe more. Going through this whole process for AIDS, which isn't gonna just put even a dent into what we are required. Yeah, I mean, I understand the plan and how it's coming about since you already own the lot. It just was kind of hoping maybe for a little bit a different spot and maybe an expansion of the elderly. I didn't realize they took the elderly out, which is a real hindrance because that would have been a perfect expansion place.
I mean, it is, like David said, it is open to people of all ages, of course. And it is a step in the right direction for the town for affordable housing. I think probably the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission are pretty aware of what the state has been mandating, at least in the last couple of years. And this is not like the dire warning or anything, but there's been threats in the legislature about withholding certain funds from municipalities that do not reach their goal. And Morris is tough. There's really no water. Well, there's no water except for the private systems we have. Very little sewer. Our sewer is run by the town of Litchfield. It's only on the Lake Road. So it's difficult to find properties that you can actually put on a fair amount of housing and make it work, because you need that water, you need that septic.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand. I did, I'm not I have children that it is a struggle for young people today to stay in their own towns because it's just not affordable.
Right.
So I'm a total advocate for it. I just was kind of hoping that spot.
Yeah, it would be more elderly
Yeah,
housing.
I thought it would be great if
Yep.
once it was purchased a few years back, I was thinking, oh, that would be great to expand the senior.
Right. Helen?
How are those 8 units broken down? Because they were mentioned as 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. How are those 8 units broken down?
David, do you have it?
Yeah, the plan right now is that there would be 2 1-bedrooms, 4 2-bedrooms, and 2 3-bedrooms.
Thank you.
I just want to make a comment in general. I'm David Week, Chairman of the Morris Planning and Zoning Commission. Some of you, most of you probably know me anyway. I've always had the impression that our town has been on it's kind of like damning with faint praise, one of the leaders for having, the percentage of affordable housing in our town, because we went out and did Eldridge some years ago, which is still, you can see how far behind the ball we are. I just think this is a positive step in the right direction. It doesn't matter who's there as long as you're serving people who have the need, and in the long run, I think it'll be a benefit for the community.
Thank you.
Veronica, I just want to comment that I think smaller projects are going to be more accepted by the townspeople after going through the whole process with the affordable plan. We saw there was not a lot of, let's get some affordable housing. So I think starting out small and doing different small projects instead of, I know you'd like to have one big thing, but that was the biggest thing nobody wanted to see, was a big housing development.
But that's not necessarily the best thing. You want to have a number of different small ones, and you preferably have it distributed around town. So it's not just this one pocket of people who are less privileged than the rest of the people in town, and there's a mixture of in the community. I think that's the best thing for society as a whole too.
Plus, I think that just a stigma that some people have with affordable housing, you think the boogeyman's coming. So.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons to spread it out around
Right.
town and not focus it all into the same area.
Like you said, have a small success and show how it works, and maybe it'll relieve some people's, anxiety or something too.
And we've got to come up with a plan for how we're gonna allow it, change the regulations so we can, whether it's across the board, whether it's a certain situation, whatever process is, we're just starting our work on that. So we can make our regulations.
Multi-family is the key.
Anyone else? I don't want to rush you. I just open conversation. David, do you have anything else?
No, I think this is a wonderful conversation. I'd love to do more too. I'd love to do senior housing. I'd love to do more family housing. But as you folks have also said, there's a very strong need, and you do what little you can, one step at a time.
Okay, it's 7:31. We'll close the hearing. Thank you for coming out. Really appreciate it. Wish there was more. Guess there was enough chairs. Thank you, David.
Okay, thanks.